Yakuza 0, Yakuza Kiwami 1 and 2, Yakuza 3 through 6, Judgment, Yakuza Like a Dragon, Lost Judgment, Like a Dragon Gaiden, The Man Who Erased His Name. I've spent all year completing each and every one of these games, every platinum trophy, every in-game completion list, all in under 1 year. Good evening, my name is John Hub, and the only thing standing between me and total completion of the Like a Dragon series is Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. Is the direct sequel to Yakuza Like a Dragon harder than the original? Will 100%ing Infinite Wealth be my longest completion run yet? Was I even able to complete this game before the end of the year? Get ready to find out all of this and more in the final installment of Year of Like a Dragon. Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth is the most recent mainline game at the time of this video, and with this game, the series formerly known as Yakuza is now known as Like a Dragon in the West. This was a fact that I assumed more people knew, but my friends looking at me crazy when I got super excited about Infinite Wealth being at the Game Awards suggested otherwise. But I digress. Infinite Wealth was released in January of 2024, and it's essentially Like a Dragon 8. In fact, it was hiding under our noses the whole time. Despite this game coming out the same year as I'm completing every game, I actually took time away from playing Yakuza Kiwami to play this one. Yo, I heard that you like a Dragon, so whatever. I beat the story and the major side content back in January, but I'm starting from scratch for the sake of this video. Also, just to get it out of the way, while I will be skipping cutscenes, rest assured I do know the story from my playthrough in January. And I'll prove it right now. The gang gets cancelled by a VTuber. That's my presentation, thank you all so much for watching. Jokes aside, Infinite Wealth has a rich story defined by amazing character moments. In my eyes, it's less of a grounded story and more of a showcase of cool characters just doing cool things. To that end, I think it would make more sense to talk about each playable party member individually, followed by talking about how my story run went gameplay-wise. And I can think of no better person to start with than Ichiban Kasuga. He's the newest protagonist of the Like a Dragon series, and he's my personal favorite. The game starts with him working at an employment agency, specifically helping ex-Yakuza guys re-enter the workforce after the Great Dissolution, a major event that dissolved two of the series' largest Yakuza families. You probably thought I was joking about the VTuber, but no, a VTuber reports on all this stuff that Kasuga's doing and gets him fired from his job. After this, he uncomfortably confesses his love to Saiko, another party member, and it goes really bad. So bad that when Sawashiro, a captain of Kasuga's former Yakuza family, tells Kasuga that he has a mother that lives in Hawaii, he departs Japan to head to Hawaii almost immediately. Over the course of the story, Ichiban discovers and does battle with a number of organized crime groups in Hawaii. There's the Barracudas, the Ganja, is that Kazuma Kiryu from Yakuza 0 through 6? Yep, turns out Kiryu was placed on a mission to Hawaii as well, and even better, he's a playable party member. He drops heartbreaking news to the party early on that he was diagnosed with cancer, and it's very evidently impacted his ability to accomplish things on his own, requiring him to rely on others and not to overexert himself. This is something that proves very difficult for Kiryu, and a lot of his story has to do with coming to terms with that. One particular encounter with a Yakuza group based in Hawaii actually causes Kiryu to pass out, which makes him return to Japan. This creates a cool dynamic where more than half of the game is spent with Ichiban in Hawaii, attempting to take down a religious group in Hawaii that has affiliated itself with the remnants of a Yakuza group in Japan, a group that Kiryu is aiming to take down. This is also the part where the story got understandably hard to follow for me, since it jumps back and forth from the Hawaii party to the Japan party every chapter, and then the finale is divided into two parts. My one gripe with Kiryu's involvement in this story is that he has a tendency to take up space in stories in an attempt to make them more engaging. This in turn takes away from the other characters' stories like Ichiban's here. There's no reason why Ichiban should be omitted from 3 full chapters of a game when he's the main character in my opinion. I would mind this more, but I'd be lying if I said Kiryu wasn't the most fun character to play in this turn-based RPG style gameplay. In fact, I'd love to take some time to talk about the gameplay, the party, and my personal story run. Thus far, I've only talked at length about Kasuga and Kiryu, since the story follows them the most, but there are actually 10 playable party members. The most playable characters in a mainline Like a Dragon game to date. There are a number of different jobs and playstyles for the male and female members of the party, but I'll be talking about how I decided to play them, as well as giving you a little description of each party member. Ichiban Kasuga is known as the hero of Yokohama. In the last game, he crowned himself a hero when he found a dusty, dirty bat wedged in the dirt, and it's been his best in slot weapon since then. I used his hero class throughout basically my entire playthrough, and it's extremely reliable. The closest comparison that I've been able to make is that the hero class operates like a paladin in other RPGs. A great all-rounder class, good damage, great tankiness, and has some party healing and buffing abilities. A great class to have for any team composition, and good thing for it because whenever you're in Hawaii, you're actually required to take Kasuga as the leader of your party. You can't switch him out, and if he falls in battle, you game over. In Japan though, your party leader is a little guy named Kazuma Kiryu. I'm sure you've heard of him. Same rules apply, you're required to take him, and if you game over you lose. But even better, he has the best class in the whole game, the Dragon of Dojima job. Essentially, they've translated Kiryu's signature fighting style from the previous games into this game's turn-based RPG combat. Infinite Wealth is the second turn-based RPG game in the series, and has greatly improved combat in all sorts of ways. You can now move in a radius to get a favorable position and strike enemies from certain angles. You can hit enemies into a wall, into other enemies, or into your own party members and they'll combo with you. If you stand near another party member or an object on the ground, you'll do a special attack that integrates those. Enemies will sometimes guard, and there are abilities that can break guards. Lastly, each party member has an infinity meter that, once filled, can be used for tag team attacks with the party leader. A lot of really cool additions, and I really hope that future games will add even more of these. Kiryu's Dragon of Dojima job has unique interactions with each of these combat additions. Brawler style, like in the action combat games, is still an all-purpose fighting style, and if you never deviate from this one, you'll probably still find great success. It has the ability to use heat actions, which can be triggered if there's a weapon nearby, or if an enemy is near certain terrain. Rush style enables Kiryu to attack twice in one turn, great for fighting multiple weak enemies. Beast style is great with weapon pickups, but at very close range, if you can attack an opponent from the back, it's the single most damaging style within this job. Other than, of course, the Dragon style. So if you fill up Kiryu's infinity meter, he can completely disregard that the game is a turn-based RPG and can freely fight enemies using his Dragon style. It's probably the coolest thing in a turn-based RPG I've ever seen. I can't sing the praises of this job enough, but we'll be here all day if I don't move on to another party member. Since the members are split up into two parties during the story, I'll talk about Ichiban's party first. Eric Tomizawa is the first member that joins. He's a cab driver who is very knowledgeable about the crime syndicates and overall underground world of Hawaii in this game, and he's been personally wronged by the leaders of many of the groups in the game in the past. Now when you think of a cab driver, you might be thinking of a scrappy sort of fighter, maybe someone that's good at assisting allies. Nope, he's actually a naturally gifted magic user. I used him as the host job, the other magic class, but his cabbie job is good as well. He has access to pretty much every elemental magic, as well as abilities that boost stats. A very nice feature is that you can transfer over skills from other jobs, so with a combination of host and cabbie abilities, Tomizawa is a very strong magic user, great at exploiting enemy weaknesses. Chitose Fujinomiya is a character who is truthfully hard to get a read on for a lot of this game. She starts off by introducing herself as Kasuga's mom's housekeeper, but that was just a front to take advantage of Kasuga. She's also, and just so you know, there will be spoilers in this video, she's also the VTuber at the beginning of the game. While she's not a main character, she's probably the most important side character because her online persona Tatara is pivotal in driving the plot, and it's only once she uses the channel to expose the antagonists of the game that her arc is complete. The job that she starts with is Eris, which is a melee-focused job that's good at throwing enemies around, and it's got some healing and buffing capabilities as well. It's not really that good in my eyes. I decided to play her as a Geodancer, which does most of the stuff I just listed, but way better. Koichi Adachi is one of Kasuga's best friends, and the first character that joins your party in the last game. He's tanky, strong, but not really agile at all. He's likely to attack last in your party, but he's got one of the best moves in the entire game, Arrest. Adachi can target most enemies and successfully take them out of the fight by putting handcuffs on them. It's basically an insta-kill ability. I played him as his detective job, which is a pretty tanky and damaging class, when you finally get to attack, that is. Jungi Han joins the party entirely too late. There are 14 chapters in the story, and he joins on chapter 13. But I didn't really use him much since I was already accustomed to the team composition I was already using. His best job is Hitman, which is a high agility, high attack damage class that excels in blunt, blade, and gun attacks. There's really no bad party members in this game, but unfortunately I use Jungi Han the least in this game. Now to talk about Kiryu's party in Japan. We all know Kiryu of course, but one of the first members we're introduced to is Sonhee. She was a pretty important character in the last game, so much so that I was surprised that she wasn't playable in that one. Well, my prayers have been answered and she's better than I could have ever hoped. Her base class is the Assassin class, which like Jungi Han has high agility and damage, excels in blunt blade and gun attacks, with the added benefit of having area of effect electric attacks. Her skills make this job one of my favorites to play, and if you add in the substitution jutsu from the Kunoichi job, I believe her to be one of the best party members in the game. Speaking of characters from the last game, Namba returns from Yakuza Like a Dragon. Like Adachi, he's one of Kasuga's best friends, but seeing as he's an ex-nurse, he spends as much time with Kiryu as possible. Namba is the Japan party's mage, and his job is called Homeless Guy despite the fact that he almost certainly has a place of residence by this point. He specializes in fire attacks, and his late game gear allows him to do more damage the more enemies that he attacks at once. Even though Kiryu's hard to beat, Namba can actually outdamage him in some cases. Next up is Saiko. Her role has been pretty reduced from the first game, but she's still an important and effective member of the party. Her default job is barmaid, which is a mostly blunt attack-focused job, but I played her as an idol, which is a pure healer class. She proved to be an invaluable member of the team during my story run, as some of the fights were truthfully very tough. Last but not least is Zhao. He's a late addition, just like Jungi, and he wins the award for my 9th most used party member. Congratulations! I would swap out Saiko for him when I didn't need a healer, but otherwise I would see Zhao as another damage dealer on a team of already great damage dealers. He just didn't make the cut for the most part. Sorry, bud. And with that, that was every party member. Now we can talk about completing this game. I'll be honest, my story run was pretty rocky at parts. Seeing as this game is a JRPG, the story is quite a long one, taking me about 12 hours even when skipping cutscenes. With 2 parties, each with their own storylines, this may as well be 2 games. The toughest part for me was being underleveled for fights. I knew from playing before that the best methods for leveling up come in the late and post game, so I just didn't bother with training while I was playing the story. The first part where this came back to bite me was during this extended combat section in Chapter 4. You have to fight a huge group of enemies with only 3 party members, and it genuinely took a couple of tries to get through this. The next wave of trouble came in Chapter 9 with his fight against Yamai. He's able to attack twice in a row on every turn, and Chitose didn't really have the healing capabilities required to keep my whole team up. But I got through it. The hardest boss fight by far is the Blessed Leviathan. This series is known for its ridiculous battles, but fighting a giant squid is just wild. You attack its head and prevent its left and right tentacles from grabbing your team. If someone happens to get grabbed, you have to destroy these sacs inside to get spat out. All the while, this thing can do massive damage to your whole team with every attack. I was prepared for this one since I played the game earlier this year, but if you don't know the Leviathan's weaknesses, you're in for a challenge. It's important to note that I found Kiryu's section to be extremely easy compared to Kasuga's. Really the only difficult part was this fight right before the final boss in the finale, where you fight these 3 super tanky guys that heal each other. And with the final boss defeated, I was now done with my story run of Infinite Wealth. But the truth is, I've merely scratched the surface of this game. And by I've merely scratched the surface, I mean it's like I've barely even started because I have to do the story all over again. Beating the story grants access to New Game Plus, as well as higher difficulties that scale every enemy's level up. You also need the DLC expansion for this game to use these features, which is pretty bullshit, but that's a topic for another video I'll probably never make. There are 4 trophies tied to New Game Plus, 1 for starting a run, 1 for beating the game on New Game Plus, and 2 tied to difficulty, 1 for hard and 1 for legend difficulty. Now, other games that have trophies for difficulty typically let you beat the hardest difficulty and then retroactively give you the trophy for the easier difficulties you still have to beat, but that isn't the case for this one. You genuinely have to beat the game on hard and also on legend. But luckily, I have a top secret cheat that you can use. The game lets you toggle the difficulty almost whenever you want, with the only exceptions being when you're in combat. It turns out that you can play the entire game on normal, then just before the final boss you can save the game, change the difficulty to beat it on hard, then load that same save file that's right before the boss, do the same thing for legend difficulty, and you've got both trophies. Now the only downside to this is you do have to fight a level 95 boss, so we're going to need to level up first. Now as you know, there's 2 parties in this game that you play as, and the final boss is actually only fought with Kiryu's party in Japan. Aside from a trophy that requires you to level up Ichiban to level 70, you actually never have to level up Ichiban's party in Hawaii past level 50 or so to beat their story, since you can play it on normal difficulty. So here's the dungeon level up strategy. It's expensive and messy, but it works pretty well. Step 1. Get a lot of money. You'll probably have a ton saved up by now just from beating the story once and now being in New Game Plus, but beating dungeons is a good way to get money too. Step 2. Unlock an expensive pound mate. Pound mates are summons that you can use to deal major damage to enemies. You can really use any one that costs 10 million yen. Step 3. Go to floor 31 or higher in Yokohama Underground Dungeon. Find an enemy that looks like this. He should be a disheveled gentleman that doesn't really look like any other enemies. There are a few possible groupings of enemies that spawn from starting a fight with this character, but the best arrangement is one with 2 Transcendent Transients and a few Invested Vagabonds. Those are the enemy names you should be looking for. Step 4. Turn up the difficulty to Legend and then fight. Use the Pound Mate on the first turn, and if you have Kiryu's Awakened Dragon ability by filling up the Infinity Meter, definitely use that. Now these enemies will run away pretty often, so even if you can only beat a couple of them, you'll still get massive XP. I don't think I was able to defeat the entire group until my party was level 80 or so. Now there's a bonus step too, if you're lucky enough. The generation of floors in the dungeons are randomized, and it's actually possible to get an arrangement where some rooms are very far away from one another. For whatever reason, if you fight a group of enemies and then run to the opposite side of the dungeon, then run back, the group of enemies will actually respawn, granted you were able to run away far enough. I got lucky and was able to fight this same group of enemies over and over again, and farmed Kiryu's entire party to level 91 or so. Now it's time to fight the final boss. I started on Legend since it would be the harder fight, and it was pretty damn easy. I got through it with basically no trouble. This final boss fight already isn't that difficult, and scaling up the levels didn't make anything much harder. Predictably, the hard mode fight was even easier, and with that, I was finally done with the story. I was about 30 to 40 hours into my playthrough of Infinite Wealth at this point, and I hadn't even started any of the side content. Side content is usually about 90% of Like a Dragon's completion experience, so maybe it'll be different this time. It wasn't. Since Infinite Wealth centers around Ichiban and Kiryu, naturally they have their own versions of side quests. Ichiban has sub-stories, which are not unlike sub-stories from every other game in the series. They're short, self-contained storylines that usually bring a lot of comedy to an otherwise pretty serious story. I mean, in this game you fight giant sharks and squids, but the story is mostly serious, I swear. Ichiban has 52 sub-stories, and I just want to take the time to list out my 3 favorites. At number 3 is this one where they turn the Anaconda Mall into an escape room. It's an effective use of space that had me way too concerned about not getting caught. You have to sneak by multiple people to collect keys and make it to the exit. I almost made it all the way before I got caught, but it turns out you can just fight your way out of it. I hope the floor hosted by Rob Lowe will implement a similar mechanic soon, where you can fight him to stay in the game. At number 2 is this one where Kasuga comes across this guy on the beach who finds out Kasuga is Japanese, and proceeds to talk about how he wants to become a samurai. The guy proceeds to view Japanese culture through an extremely superficial and almost cartoonish lens throughout the entire sub-story, and it reminded me of real-life people I knew growing up whose entire knowledge of Japanese culture was through anime or the Persona series. And at number 1 is, of course, the one with the baby men. These guys are a running joke in the series at this point, and I have no doubt that they'll be back for the next Like a Dragon game. Now, unlike Ichiban, Kiryu's side quests revolve around memories from his past. He takes time to reconnect with old friends, as well as reminisce about old times. These can be found in the form of lifelinks and Memoirs of a Dragon. Lifelinks are extended cutscenes where Kiryu has run-ins with old friends from past games. It's really easy to call these fan service, but they're done in such a way that they're very endearing to watch. Even if you haven't played every game in the series, they're still great scenes nonetheless. Memoirs of a Dragon are a lot simpler. There are a ton of these storybook icons on the map, and traveling to them will allow Kiryu to reminisce on old times. Completing items on Kiryu's completion list, as well as doing lifelinks and memoirs, increases Kiryu's soul, tech, and body stats. Increasing these stats will upgrade Kiryu's brawler, rush, and beast styles respectively, and the upgrades are very noticeable. If you only plan to do a couple of side activities while playing Infinite Wealth, definitely let this be one of them, just for the upgrades alone. And speaking of side activities that you should probably do, it's not that big, and it certainly isn't swell. I can't think of a better name for this game's final dungeon. Jokes aside, I think it's a surfing reference. The Big Swell is a post-game dungeon with 5 sections, and a trophy for beating each. It's also locked behind the DLC, which again is pretty ass. It's kind of silly because the Western release of Yakuza Like a Dragon had a similar DLC that only locked 2 jobs and a few additional items behind a $30 paywall. Infinite Wealth now has the same paywall, but has locked even more content behind it. Like, I didn't mind spending extra for Like a Dragon because I do want to support the series however I can, but this is now impacting players on a much larger scale, and I believe the outrage for this to be completely justified. I only talk about this so much because the Big Swell, combined with the DLC-only ability to change the difficulty, is undoubtedly the best way to farm experience as well as money. For completion's sake though, the Big Swell is a series of very easy dungeon floors and boss battles that you can repeat to farm experience, money, and any crafting items. That's really all there is to say about this one. The bosses are just harder versions of bosses you fight during the story, And since you're in post-game, you have the choice to tackle this one with all 10 party members. There's also a pretty inconsequential narrative to go along with this one that features some enjoyable character moments if you just need to see a little bit more of a specific character you like. Again, if you have the DLC and need money or experience, definitely just wait until post-game and go here. And now to talk about minigames. You can look pretty much anywhere on any of Infinite Wealth's maps and find a minigame to play. These are fun on their own, and they definitely chose a very solid lineup of minigames for this game, but there are also completion metrics that may require you to play any one minigames upwards of 30 times in a row to complete. I think it's important to bring up the very worst part of completing minigames and this game in general. Since you alternate between playing as Ichiban and Kiryu, they actually each have their own completion list with a lot of duplicates and very little crossover. Other than a few exceptions, such as playing every unique minigame or singing every unique karaoke song, you have to do the completion metrics for pretty much every minigame twice to complete Infinite Wealth. Thankfully, there's some minigames only available in Hawaii or Japan, so you only have to do those once, but those specific minigames seem to take even longer to complete more often than not. So here's my list of every minigame in Infinite Wealth from easiest to hardest. At the easiest spot is going to be the gambling games. You've got Oichokabu, Blackjack, Koi Koi, and Poker in that order, and they're all similarly easy to complete. The only completion metrics are getting a certain number of chips or wooden tags, as well as playing each of these with friends 5 times. Of course, you have to do all of this twice, and Poker actually has 2 locations in Japan, one of which is at a restaurant that offers poker, where the betting limit is much lower, so it takes longer to complete it. Nevertheless, so long as you have a little money to spend, even if you have no sense of strategy, you'll eventually win all of these by just playing enough games. Next up, something I'm a little bit of an expert on. Mismatch is a dating app where you meet one of 10 matches and text your way into their hearts. This is going at number 15 on my list, but for some of y'all, it would probably be around the top 3. You have to create a profile that will match with each specific person, aka you have to outright lie and say you're a doctor sometimes. You think of the best responses you can, and then have to type it out by tip-tapping the face buttons. This one's very fun and takes a reasonable amount of time to complete, making it one of the smoothest Like a Dragon minigame experiences. At number 14 is Shogi, and it's a bit more complicated, but a lot shorter to complete. All you have to do is complete all 10 Shogi puzzles and play 10 matches, and the puzzles count as matches. You have to do this a second time because this minigame is present in Hawaii and Japan, but the puzzle completion is saved so you can just beat the same easy puzzle 10 times. Number 13 is Darts, and its completion is the polar opposite of Shogi. It's an easy minigame, but you have to play a ton of it. You have to hit a few hat tricks, which are triple bullseyes, and play a bunch of matches with friends as both protagonists. It's light work. Karaoke is as simple as hitting buttons to the beat. There's 15 songs to choose from, and while the progress for singing each unique song with 90% accuracy or higher is carried over between protagonists, having to sing X amount of songs is not, so it leads you to have to sing like 30 songs total. You can just start a song and leave the game running though. The lineup of songs is not the easiest, so it's going here on the list. The batting center is a center where you can bat. You have to beat the beginner, intermediate, and advanced courses, as well as hit 150 home runs on the home run course. For reference, you can hit a total of 10 home runs max in each home run course, so that's like 50 times you have to run it. No? We're in the top 10, and there's no better minigame to get this started than golf. There are 2 course types, a closest to the pin challenge, where you have to get a pretty achievable score on each difficulty, as well as a bingo challenge, where you have to hit faraway squares and make bingos. I don't know if it's just because I've played 11 other Like a Dragon games, but I still believe we're firmly in the easy minigame territory. Virtua Fighter 3 TB is a Sega arcade classic. This series has featured Virtua Fighter 2 and 5 in the past, but I think this is the first game to have 3. You choose 3 characters, and every round the losing player's character swaps. You have to beat 8 rounds in a bonus round and play as every character. There's some cheesy combos that you can do to beat this one easily, and you'd best believe I did those. Yep, your eyes do not deceive you. That is my favorite character, Ichiban Kasuga, driving for DoorDash. You do crazy BMX tricks and collect food to deliver to people on the streets of Hawaii. To complete this, you have to get max rank, earn a ton of money, and do like a million tricks on your bike. The tricks were the last thing I had to do, so I had to do 2 extra runs where I just flipped in place the whole time. Honestly, the hardest part of this one is listening to the announcer say, "Super crazy delivery" for the millionth time. Every other game developer better watch out. Like a Dragon came from Mario Kart, and now it's coming for Pokemon Snap too. Sicko Snap has Ichiban taking a scenic trolley tour, and snapping as many pictures as he can of buff, scantily clad men. A lot of minigames, this one included, have a currency tied to them for playing the minigame, which is required for getting certain gear and items. I had to play this one about 40 times in a row to get enough Sicko Snap points for everything. I had something of a photographic memory by the end, if you can even understand that type of humor. Can Quest returns from Yakuza Like a Dragon, and it's pretty much just copy and pasted over from that game. You ride through a narrow section of Yokohama and have to collect cans while avoiding and sometimes bumping into opposing can collectors. This one is always a bit harder than I remember, and this time is no exception. You just collect cans and knock people off their bikes to complete this one, but it takes quite a few runs to get the requirement. Sega Bass Fishing is a game that I'm frankly surprised is included in this game. It's just fishing, and it's honestly eerily similar to the fishing minigame in Yakuza 3 through 5. You cast a line, get a bite, and then reel the fish in. It's an arcade game, so as long as you got the quarters, you can just keep playing until you win this one. The completion requires you to play the first 3 stages, and it takes some time to get used to, and unsurprisingly, you have to play this one twice. The UFO Catcher is a claw game with more than 40 unique prizes to catch, but the claw is impractical. It's a joke. This one's a big loser. We're down to the top 3, and few things are harder than good old-fashioned book smarts. The vocational school is a great way to increase Kasuga's personality stats, which increases resistances, unlock new jobs, and make certain abilities more powerful. I guess knowledge really is power. What can I even say about Mahjong? This may be the last time I ever played Mahjong in my life, and they did not make it easy for me this time. Again, because there's 2 completion lists, you have to win a total of 40 hands of Mahjong and get first place at every Mahjong table between 4 different parlors. Each table is a different difficulty, but trust me, they're all hard. This is a point that I'll expand upon later in the video, but Infinite Wealth has the single most amount of RNG of any game in the entire series. There are just so many moments where a simple task can take 5 minutes or 6 hours. It really just depends on how the world decides to treat you that day. I can't really tell you how long Mahjong took me to complete. It's a complete blur to me, and recording it would have just taken up space on my hard drive for something that I'm really only talking about for like a minute. There was a time where I really enjoyed Mahjong, or maybe I just deluded myself into believing I did, but I am so done with this minigame, man. Spike Out is stupid. If I had to describe it in 3 words, it'd be stupid, dumb, idiot, in that order. It's a 3D arcade beat 'em up that has all the makings of a very cool minigame, if only the completion metrics were a bit more reasonable. Predictably, this one is in Hawaii and Japan, so of course you have to do this one twice, and the only completion metrics are play as all 4 characters, which you could do in 2 seconds, and beat all 5 stages. Yeah, that's pretty easy, is what I would say if it were easy. First off, one of the 5 stages is a bonus stage that's very easy to miss. There's a very specific order that you have to progress the game, but you actually can beat all 5 stages in one go. I'd recommend looking up a guide online, but the gist of it is you can take a specific shortcut in stage 2, which brings you to stage 4. If you then beat the boss of stage 4 without beating any enemies that fight with the boss, you go to stage 3 instead of stage 5. Then stage 3 leads to stage 5. Does that all make sense? This was an arcade game that was absolutely trying to rob kids of their money, so you'll be losing a lot in this one. It also takes about 2 hours to beat all 5 stages, and you have to do it twice. My first run went very smooth, but on my second run I actually came across a game-breaking softlock that requires you to quit out and start from the beginning if it ever happens. If you beat a boss and get KO'd at the same time yourself, you respawn and the game thinks the boss is still alive, so the game will not progress. I had this happen twice, so yeah, Spike Out took 5.5 hours for me to complete. Thanks guys! And believe it or not, there is another minigame I haven't mentioned. This next one I believe to be the absolute worst. It's a battle win or lose. It's the friends you make, it's the road you choose. The Sujimon League sucks. In Yakuza Like a Dragon, the game categorizes its enormous enemy roster size by cataloging them in what's called the Suji decks. So any enemy you fight on the street isn't just some ordinary guy, it's a Sujimon, obviously. Well, Infinite Wealth takes this idea one step further. Just like how Pokemon has generations, when you go to Hawaii in the story, there's a whole new generation of Sujimon to discover, and this time, collect. Yep, you can now collect Sujimon and battle them in the Sujimon League. You collect gym badges and even fight the Sujimon champions at the end. The DLC gives you access to the strongest Sujimon by far, so the actual league and battling is an absolute breeze. It's the other stuff that's extremely annoying to complete. First off, you of course have to collect every single Sujimon available in the game. You can do this in a couple of ways, but the best way I could find was just by rolling the gacha over and over again. Yep, this game's got a whole gacha system and it ran my pockets like any other gacha would. Contrary to what I read online, you can actually get every single Sujimon through the gacha system. There are 5 types of Sujimon and type-specific gachas, but the basic general one can actually give you any Sujimon in the game. There are 5 legendaries as well, and those took quite a while to find. What you're seeing on screen right now is what I did. I just rolled the same gacha over and over again until eventually I was done. Now the other way to find Sujimon that I should have taken more advantage of is Sujimon raids. There are 16 raids for every type of Sujimon, for a total of 80 raids that you can find. Little did I know, the game actually lists out each and every raid, so I actually had to do them all. I went out, I fought every raid that was available on the map, used items to respawn the raids, and roll 1 in 16 odds to find specific raids that I was looking for. This took about 10 or 11 hours, I'm not joking. This game has that type of RNG where it's so hard to find certain things, you start to believe that you're doing things the wrong way because otherwise you should have seen it by now. No other words I can say or amount of explanation I can possibly give will convey to you accurately how long this shit took, but just believe me when I say I spent 10 plus hours circling the map just to find a level 20 enemy for a raid. Not to mention on top of the Sujimon League, there's also the Sujidex as it relates to fighting enemies in combat, so you need to find every available Sujimon in battle. There's only about 100 Sujimon that you can catch in battle with, but there's 300 that can be found in the world to fight. And this took hours. There are enemies that are extremely common in the early game, but because I decided to grind out everything in post-game, finding the weaker enemies took actually forever. I almost thought they were impossible to find until they randomly appeared all of a sudden. Really the only saving grace of all the Sujimon shit is by completing the league, Kasuga gains access to the Sujimancer job, a really powerful job that lets you equip your Sujimon as weapons to make your skills stronger. It's a very fun job and I used it whenever I could, not really worth all the unnecessary running through the map though. But you know, I can't help it guys, I just love aimlessly running through the city so much. I just wish there were like 30 other reasons you have to run around the city so I can do even more of it. We don't even have time in the video for jokes anymore. This is going to be a jokeless video from now on. This is just me listing things now. I'm going to list in excruciating detail every single activity that requires you to run around the map, whether it's interacting with things, fighting things, picking up things, etc. I hope this will be very fun to watch. First off, there's just general travel requirements. You have to run 50 or 100 kilometers with each character, as well as swim 5 kilometers in Hawaii. Next, there's combat requirements. I did most of these in dungeons, but you have ones for beating 100 enemies as each job as both Kasuga and Kiryu, and for Kiryu it only counts in Japan, and for Kasuga it only counts in Hawaii. You have to clear 60 floors of each dungeon and beat 15 bosses, even though the dungeons only have 40 floors and 8 bosses respectively. You have to do hundreds of team combo attacks, hundreds of attacks that have you picking up something off the ground to attack the enemy with, hundreds of attacks where you knock enemies into the wall, or attacks where you have to attack them with something they're weak to, or use tag attacks, or even 100 grapple attacks to break their guard. Pretty much every new combat mechanic that's been added in Infinite Wealth is now being thrown back in your face as just another thing to complete. Then, there's what I like to call picking shit up off the ground. You need to pick up hundreds of herbs, pick up shells and trash from sand dunes on the beach, go up to these yellow highlighted areas and pick up pocket change on the ground or in the ocean. You have to find these magazine racks and pick up magazines that never seem to respawn. You could taxi to try to reset some of this stuff. By the way, you have to ride 100 taxis. But it seems like you have to find every possible spawn location of the herbs and the magazines, and then the ones that you collected before will slowly start to respawn. And who could forget picking literal shit up? You have to find public toilets and take this yellow shit out of them. You gotta eat more fiber, bro. I don't even know what's going on here. There's pickups that can be exchanged for valuable items. There's the trash on the beach which can be exchanged for accessories or crafting items, and these fortunes on the ground that you need 100 of and you can exchange them for all sorts of gear. Luckily, there's a few more than 100 of these fortunes, so you don't have to worry if you missed a couple. There's interactables around the map. You can shoulder check trees to get fruits and shit. You have to ride the trolley 20 times, even though there's not even close to 20 reasons to need to ride the trolley. You have to go fishing like 50 times between both protagonists. Fishing in this game is just casting a line, waiting to hit a button at the right time, and maybe getting something rare, but mostly not. All the items that you've collected thus far from the ground, collecting herbs, the fish, etc., can be used to make food at the bar using certain ingredients. You need to make all 10 unique food items and make 30 total. Luckily this is shared between Kasuga and Kiryu, so no extra grind should be required past what you had to do for the completion list. And I haven't even gotten to the bad stuff yet. There are almost 100 different photo spots between Hawaii and Japan, where you just have to find a location based on a zoomed in photo that you're given, and take a picture just to show you know where it is. Just a lot of running around, man. There are over 50 CDs strewn about the map, usually in just odd locations, and the CDs blend in as regular item pickups. You have to open 100 safes or shipping containers. The name entirely depends on what map you're on. You can do this in dungeons though, so it's not that hard. There are multiple activities that raise your bond with your party when you do them. When you visit most stores, you can get a gift for your party members, and it's cute and they say thank you. You have to do this like 50 times, and that part's not cute. You have to go to every restaurant in the game on every map, and some restaurants have one or multiple conversations that trigger when you have certain members in your party. Many you have to eat at the same restaurant a couple of times with the right formation of party members. There are these heart icons on the map that start conversations that reveal information about specific party members. These are a great way to get to know everyone, but I'm so focused with collecting shit that I don't even care. There are also party conversations that don't show up on the map until you're standing right where they're meant to trigger. These are just funny little one-off conversations that are definitely worth listening to when you find them, but I don't care because I gotta find all these fucking things. The last party activity is requesting every hostess at every hostess bar. There's one in Japan and one in Hawaii, and it's the best way to raise your bond with your party members. Was that a lot or was that a lot? Well, there's still one more thing. When you first get to Hawaii, Ichiban is shown the Aloha Links app on his phone. This is an app that enables you to make friends by waving to people on the streets, and there's 200 people to befriend and max out friendship with. The NPCs are region locked, so you won't find an NPC that spawns in East Waikiki in the cultural district, for example. That being said, it's still random what NPCs will show up in the area when it's loaded in, and the only consistent way to find a specific person is to take a taxi and reload the area in hopes that the person you're looking for will show up. There are 3 different types of NPCs as well. There's NPCs that you can just wave to and their friendship meter slowly raises. You have to run into these NPCs 4 times max to max out the friendship. There's NPCs that can show up and you can wave at them, but then they also appear as people in trouble that need to be rescued by doing an easy street fight. These will give a huge boost to the friendship. The third NPC is the easiest because these are stationary NPCs that you need to give some sort of gift. These are usually dogs, cats, or birds, and you just have to give them dog, cat, or bird food. There's a couple of fringe NPCs, like vendor NPCs, that only show up sometimes and their meter fills whenever you buy something from them, or NPCs that only show up in the evening. From my count, about 180 out of 200 showed up during the day, and the rest only showed up in the evening. And if you can believe it, there is one last run around the city to find shit grind, and it's finding every piece of gear and every weapon in the game. A large bulk of these can be found by going into every shop in the game's 3 settings of Honolulu, Ijincho, and Kamurocho, and buying out the entire stock of weapons and gear. The Anaconda Mall in Honolulu and a luxury store in Kamurocho have access to the highest level gear money can buy, and it's super expensive. I decided to save this for later, while I started grinding the rest of the gear through other methods. There's a ton of mini games with their own currency and stores where you can buy a couple of weapons each. Crazy Delivery, Shogi, CanQuest, Sicko Snap, Sujimon League, just to name a few. If you thought the insane amount of RNG in this game was over, dungeons have a different pool of random drops every 10 floors, as well as shops with exclusive gear at dungeon entrances. This took a lot of running around dungeons to find every possible drop, and it was not fun to do. But the source of most of the weapons in the game are found through Julie's Gearworks, this game's version of a blacksmith. You farm up tons of crafting materials, money, and weaker weapons to upgrade them into brand new weapons. Each job has about 8 weapons each to unlock, meaning that's a lot of shit. I got the weapons in question wherever I can find them. Some could only be found in safes or containers around town, which was kinda weird. And after all of this grind, my biggest fear turned out to be true. I needed more money, $2.5 million to be exact. If I was ever going to get enough money for the rest of the weapons and gear in this game, I needed an enterprise of sorts. No, a nightmarish island resort. Anyone that's played this game knew it was coming. Dondoko Island is a paradise island resort that you're introduced to and forced to play in for a little bit during the story. It's the perfect utopia and dystopia all wrapped up into one. By that I mean it's got all the creative, wacky, and fun stuff you typically find in Like a Dragon side content, with all the annoying grind to bog it all down. You start out with a small region of the resort unlocked. All you have available is a little shack, a workbench, the general store where you can upgrade your tools or sell things you've crafted or collected, and a bunch of trash. You can clear trash in certain regions to lower the price of renovation in the area and expand the resort that way. Through collecting bugs, fish, ore, and things on the beach, you can increase the island's popularity, and by placing decorations, buildings, and objects throughout the resort, you can boost the island's satisfaction value. Raising these two values as well as expanding your resort are the criteria required for increasing the island's star rating. Once you get the resort to 5 stars, you've beaten Dondoko. But of course, it's never that simple to complete these things. Dondoko Island has its own completion list, as well as a list that tracks how many items you've collected. Collect enough items and you max out the possible sell price for that item. There are 117 items that you can collect, and you'd best believe that I collected 10 or 30 or 70 or 100 or however many of the item it needed me to collect, I did that. Dondoko Island has its own unique currency called Doko Bucks. You can use these for just about anything, and you can convert them into money outside of the minigame once you leave. There's a completion list item for getting like 100 million Doko Bucks. I'll save you the montage of things you have to do for this side content, and just say that any possible thing that there is to do on this island, they want you to do it more times than you'll ever deem necessary. Aside from the final crafting items I needed, Dondoko Island was the very last thing I had to do to complete Infinite Wealth and complete my Year of Like a Dragon challenge. So I sucked it up and went through the painstaking grind. I ran a nearly identical route every day for 100 total in-game days on Dondoko Island. Just for reference, an in-game day takes anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes, and you can't go to the next day until it's evening or nighttime. I'll let a mathematician run the numbers on that one, but I felt each and every one of those days take more and more out of me. The sheer number of things to do was not meant for someone to do in just a couple of days. I stayed up many nights at late hours, and a lot of it is just a blur to me at this point. I'll give you the top 5 hardest parts of completing this one and leave it at that. I guarantee a couple of these aren't what you'd expect. Number 5 is destroying 5,000 trash piles, 1,500 trees, and 1,500 rocks. As I mentioned, you can clear trash to reduce the price of expanding the island, but I hope you didn't expand too quickly because after you unlock the entire island, you could expect to find only about 50 trash piles a day, and even less trees and rocks in general. If you're aiming to 100% Dondoko Island, make sure you clear as much trash, trees, and rocks as you can every in-game day. Number 4 is finding 10 Tsuchinokos. These are little black bugs that can only spawn in about 3 places and are very rare. They'll also run away if you move towards them too quickly. Thankfully, traveling between the farm and the island will respawn bugs that run away, but this still took about 60 to 70 in-game days to find all of these. Number 3, random events. Technically, all of Dondoko Island is random events, from what items will spawn for you to pick up, to when certain things happen. Farm and lodging raids, though, take the cake for the worst random events. Every once in a while, a group of enemies will come to attack the farm or a random region on the island. You have to fight them off in either a Sujimon battle for the farm, or with your bat for the random regions. Getting 20 farm raids to spawn was the very last thing I did on my run of Dondoko Island. I would have been done on day 96, but it took a few extra days for that last raid to spawn, so I was done on day 100 on the dot. Number 2 is finding 40 silver starfish. There are regular silver and gold variants of pretty much everything in the game. I don't know if I was just unlucky or what, but these silver starfish would just not spawn. I got through it, but it took way longer than it needed to, and there's only a couple of places to find these. At the number 1 spot is catching over 400 Dondoko scuttlers for souvenirs. Early on in your resort, you unlock the ability to create souvenirs to gift your resort guests. I sincerely hope you didn't sell a single thing so far, because in order to craft enough souvenirs that the game tells you you've crafted enough, you need to get something like 450 Dondoko scuttlers. These are likely the most common fish on Dondoko Island, but with only so many fishing spots, you're likely to find anywhere from maybe 2 to 10 of these in a day. I didn't sell a single thing I collected until the very end of my run, and good thing for that. And after all of that, I was finally done. So I did what any reasonable person would do and tore down my entire island to forget what had happened, and sold everything for Doko Bucks. I made $1 million from resort guests and expanding my island, and the conversion rate for the Doko Bucks I had on hand would make it so I had exactly the $2.5 million I needed to buy and craft the rest of the weapons in the game, thereby completing the whole game. Well, it turns out you can only convert 5.5 million Doko Bucks to 55,000 USD once per in-game day, which I can only assume is some sort of Dondokan tax law or something. I held on to my Doko Bucks, so it would have taken 28 additional in-game days to convert all of it. This was too much time, so nevertheless, I had to make my final millions another way. In order to make the last of the 2.5 million I needed, I went back to my old reliable, the Big Swell. I did about 6 to 7 runs of the 4th section, which for some reason gives more money than the 5th and final section, and just like that, I had the money I needed. I went to the luxury weapons store, got everything I needed, and crafted the rest of the weapons I didn't have the money for before, and I did it. I completed the game. That was the very last thing I had to do for Infinite Wealth. I didn't really know how to feel. In a single action, I went from going on this year-long journey to 100% 12 different games in this franchise, to being completely done. It took 131.9 hours, which was my longest 100% by far. I streamed my final moments live on Twitch and YouTube, and someone in my chat asked if I felt empty after all this was done. I didn't take it as like a mean thing to say, and honestly, I don't know how to feel. Completing these games has certainly been the most meaningful part of my year, yet when I look back at it, it seems so insignificant. Not in like a bad way, it's just like you set out to accomplish a goal, and it's so important to you, and once it's over, you can either sit there and celebrate or ask yourself, what's next? Maybe the truth is, I just have to stop and relax and think about it for a bit. My whole life for this past year has been spent completing these games, or when I'm not completing them, thinking about completing them, and I think I just need some time to reflect on it, or just not think about it at all. I really did not take a single moment to stop and smell the roses this whole challenge run, because how could I possibly have the time to do so? I don't know if this is all coming off as meaningless rambling, or it's just late when I'm recording this, but I can promise 2 things next year. 1, I'm going to keep completing games. Now, I probably won't focus on the Like a Dragon series as much, but rest assured the Yakuza fans will get their fill. And 2, I'm going to slow down now and then. There have been a few times where I've been able to sit back and just enjoy games I've been playing. The entire time I've been working on this video, I've been fighting the urge to play Marvel Rivals so I can get this out before the end of the year. It's real fun, man. It's like Overwatch, but you could be the Hulk. But I haven't been able to play that or anything this year without thinking about the challenge in the back of my mind. If you're an aspiring creator or artist trying to make something on YouTube, or become a streamer, or draw something, whatever your craft is, it turns out that you need to be thinking about that thing a lot to make it happen. I averaged about a video a month this whole year, and I gotta say, I thought about the videos a lot more than I worked on them. So if you're gonna work on something, make sure you're working on something you love, otherwise you might just end up hating it. Alright, now I'm getting rambly. Thank you so much for watching, and if it wasn't already clear, I did that.